Ni hao. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A little bit of an introduction that you've already heard. Michael Moore is my name from the University of Ulster in Belfast. I'm also one of the artists in residence in the Inga Museum. I've been here for 2 months and I've had a fantastic experience. So please come to the studio today or tomorrow. Also, we have a very good partnership between the Inga Museum and the International Academy of Ceramics. The International Academy of Ceramics General Assembly is coming to Dublin, my city, in September, but it will be here in Inga in 2018. And Inga is a member of the IAC, so we have a very good partnership. I'd like to speak on behalf of the speakers. This afternoon we have 4. We have Neil Bransford from the UK, Francesca Ardini from Italy, Kukuli Velarde, and also Jimena Ducci. Oh, did I get that correct? Yeah. So we have a topic of post-colonialism and post-industrialization. So the speakers will present in the sequence. You find them in the catalogue. And I will invite questions at the end. I would just remind you to please turn off or turn down your mobile phones. And I will start by inviting Mr. Neil Bransford to begin.
This presentation centres upon my ongoing artistic mediation of a particular locality in the UK, Stoke-on-Trent, the traditional centre of British ceramic production, and how recent effects of globalisation have impacted upon its heritage industries. Stoke-on-Trent has almost been exclusively known for its industrial-scale pottery manufacturing since the early 18th century. It remains one of the few British cities synonymous with a particular industry that has shaped both the region's economy and physical landscape. This image, taken in the late 19th century, illustrates a time when plenty of smoke meant plenty of work. Stoke's success as a powerhouse during the Industrial Revolution was due to its abundant mineral deposits of coal, iron ore and clay, which were often worked from the same seam. Coal mining rapidly expanded in North Staffordshire due to demands from pottery and iron production, and remained an important industry throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, employing many thousands of local people. Though as a result of large-scale buyouts and what was deemed as unviable productivity, both industries began to decline in the latter half of the 20th century. What was a thriving industrial conurbation now remains largely a centre for service industries and distribution centres. Many once historic sites of manufacture have disappeared have been replaced by what are often minimum wage enterprises. To give an indication of the scale of loss of employment in the area, at its peak in 1948, the ceramic industry employed an average of 79,000 people. Today there are around 6,000. However, despite suffering massively from the decline in manufacturing in recent years, the ceramic industry has managed to continue production in the area, which is still commonly known as the Potteries, a centre of world-class ceramic manufacture. Pottery making in the area dates back to at least the 1st century AD during Roman occupation, but it wasn't until the late 17th century when demand for tea wares inspired by the Orient changed a peasant craft into a manufacturing revolution. In the 1690s, 2 Dutch silversmiths, John and David Ehlers, came to North Staffordshire to exploit the area's fine iron-bearing clays in imitation of imported Yising wares. They are believed to be the first of cast using liquid clay into plaster moulds, a method which allowed subsequent potters to produce complex shapes in bulk. Where the Ehlers set up their early manufactory holds particular personal resonance, as its location in Bradwell Wood is the area where I grew up and a place where I first encountered clay in its geographic abundance. The image on the right is a surface outcrop of red clay from behind my parents' house. which is part of the same seam the Allers used to produce their red stonewares. My family's history of employment in the ceramics industry also remains seminal to my continual exploration of the histories of clay and ceramics as both artistic medium and subject. On the right is an image from 1859, a group of employees who had served a total of 54.5 years service, with a family descendant, Moses Brownsword, on the left. Seated in the centre of the group is Josiah Wedgwood's grandson, Francis Wedgwood. The right-hand image is one of my grandmother, Doris Pettit, taken from the Carlton Ware factory in 1940. She spent most of her working life in the ceramics industry, employed in semi-skilled and skilled labour. In 1999, headlines of mass redundancies and the prominent demolition of this industry prompted an ongoing project to photographically archive the scale of dereliction across the 6 towns of the city. Past policies of outsourcing labour to the Far East, corporate mismanagement and failure to accommodate rapid shifts in the global marketplace have all contributed to the closure and demolition of key historic sites of ceramic production. The Potteries Museum's archaeological collections of tools and byproducts of mass production, such as wasters from the 18th and 19th century, further constituted an important reference point. As all evidence of touch through the standardization of products through industrialization was considered a flaw, saggers and kiln props became more poignant as they retained in their fabric the imprints of human contact. The Potteries Museum's taxonomies of shards also began to influence systematic modes of spatial presentation. At this point, I would create fragments inadvertently through various explorations of traditional process and visually juxtapose these within a delineated space. The fragment became a simple metaphoric reference to a cultural heritage fast becoming a relic in post-industrial Britain. The initiation of the British Ceramics Biennial in 2009 helped support my personal agenda in the regeneration of the city through culturally led initiatives. Through its programme of events and exhibitions, I had the opportunity to import an international perspective which interrogated Stoke-on-Trent's pre-industrial connections through the Marl Hole project. As I mentioned earlier, North Staffanshire's success was due to its mineral wealth, long flame coal and excellent red burning clays for potting. The geographic abundance of the latter, known as a Truria Marl, formed the premise of the project, and an interest in the artistic reactivation of this landscape through a range of ephemeral interventions, which would interrogate the articulation of clay and fuse interactions of making performance with the site-specific. Prominent features in this district are the exhausted sites of open cast excavation, known as marl holes. Here, an abundance of clay could be easily accessed, offering previously an unimaginable sense of scale to work. To accompany me on this pursuit of disrupting the confines of one's practice, I invited 3 artists, Alexander Inglefrit, Torbjörn Cavaspo and Pekka Pekari, whose relationship with clay continues to challenge existing parameters. With regard to the implements found in the immediate vicinity, the use of the quarry's earth movers and diggers were quickly commandeered. This facilitated the opportunity to respond to an abundance of material and develop work on a much more ambitious scale. In 2011, the British Ceramics Biennial was granted access to the former Spode site, opening up 230 years of the city's industrial heritage for artists to interrogate and redefine creatively. This opportunity led to the project Topographies of the Obsolete, initiated in 2012 by myself in conjunction with Professor Anne-Allen Midland from Bergen Academy of Art and Design. It's a project structured around 3 international residencies on the former Spode site. It questions what is and how ceramic and clay can be understood as both a material and subject in contemporary art practice, and explores the remnants of post-industry itself as raw material. Over 40 interdisciplinary staff and students from various educational institutions from the UK and Europe were allowed to work in a majority of Spode's public and hidden spaces, including the factory's vast mould stores. When the 10-acre site closed in 2008, most of its production infrastructure and contents were left intact. But the human cost of its closure remained eerily omnipresent. Working with such a loaded site, questions surrounding the ethics of what we were doing became of fundamental importance. As Stoke has such a high level of economic degeneration, unemployment, and long-term state dependency, what can an artist bring to such a place? Is the artist merely an apocalypse tourist cashing in on social misfortune with little long-term impact? Or is the artist's role instrumental to the process of culture-led regeneration and the revitalization of the city? One of my works from the Topographies project, National Treasure, attempts to directly elevate the status of threatened skills from the ceramics industry. It parodies the present trend of factory tourism, which locates artisans on public display whilst they ply their skills. Though National Treasure employs former artisans of Spode and other factories in the context of the clothes factory, these workers are the last generation of China painters in Stoke, whose skills have been gradually displaced by both changing tides of fashion and by ceramic print technologies for mass production. Like many skills in the ceramic industry, these are transmitted from generation to generation. With few apprenticeships and the decline of the industry over the past 2 decades, there has been a significant gap in this tradition and a danger of specific skills disappearing. These skills are an intangible cultural heritage which need greater recognition and protection, not from the point of nostalgia, but as a means of preserving a sense of identity and continuity to be shared and passed on to future generations. Inspired by the 18th century genre of ceramics by the picturesque movement and their romanticisation of British ruins, I instructed the artisans to paint on the back of abandoned plates found at the Spode site. Though the ruins are taken from Spode and from the post-industrial wastelands across the 6 towns of Stoke. The post-industrial landscape of North Staffordshire is an inevitable symbol of loss, but sad laments for past glories are not the avowed aims of this work. The reanimated remains and neglected places of this failed environment demonstrate that with every end there is a new beginning, and that these fresh perspectives are an important contribution to culture-led revitalisation of the city. Thank you.
In my current study, once we produce mainly ceramic pyramids of fruit, that one. For example, in this factory that now is my studio, and I really do a sacrifice to take it like a rent because it's very big. Here we have to think of one window was for one person to continue to create this for a big company like Harrods. Now is closed because of the social economic crisis is really is a real problem for this town. As a hobby ceramist in the beginning, because I didn't do any course of ceramic, I start to know ceramic through. Start to work around with vase and bowl and to understand how can I apply my imagination, my way to view on ceramic. So as a result of profound reflection of scientific nature, I consider the idea that the world is not based on linearity, but that is a sense sinks to chaos. On this surface, the operation dissolution, the linearity free by cracks, dynamism, and the immediate traits with the creative volume seemingly fragile, uncontrolled of my ceramics. Proliferation and envelope are born from scientific research that comes to the first form of life. Okay. Shells in the first form, tangling the expansor of the polymers that are the basis of the life from an inorganic matter. The concept of home for me as a place of family and property has become today a precarious concept. The ceramic as a symbol of the object of the domestic use of Megaron. Megaron is a word that meaning the center of the family, is forced change. It's also fragile and precarious. The ceramic undergoes the space that surrounds it. The will of the user who's it and the time is no longer immutable, static and solid presence in the house. The surfaces are blurred. Everything is changeable, subject to evolution of inorganic and bacterial phenomena, as if a ceramic is more like an organism that lives, dies, and evolves, with processes like cellular explosion that seem ready to grow anywhere in your home, independently and uncontrollably. The metal, this for example, the metal as the particularly to withstand high temperatures also allows to create small flying volumes. The color proliferation is really intense, almost alien to ceramics. The color proliferation in blue, in this case, seems almost plastic, creating a real sense of transformation of the usual glossy white surface into something continuous, lively, and constantly expanding. This was I really like the work of Megaron that you can see in Biennale. I really love to work in process because I think that art has something of didactic too. So I like to show what I'm feeling in all the process when I start to see like a vase and what is my influence to arrive to a final, my final expression, you know. Okay. Envelope is the transformation as a movement. Today everything is movement, a factor that distinguishes our society. From communication to the way we move through the space, the statue no longer exists, and this must reflect in the object of our living. Okay. The figure of the tray has always been solid edge of the home. It becomes a forming continuous motion and changing in any way it is observed. This dynamic volume creates an apparently precarious and fragile volume and uncontrolled stress in defining the environment. The volume is made up of ceramic tubular of different diameter to allow lightness and give a sound to the work if you touch it. A complex process of glaze ensures strength to the work. These are the first work that I realized when I approached to ceramic. These are final results, and in this case, when I take rent this old factory, I found a lot of old luster, and I combined them in new mix, and arrived to this strange result, like to give new light to old luster, so to old technique, and I combine this like I call it a dark rainbow. That I want to always work around something that is not completely defined, to show always this precarious and stable moment where we are living. This overworks. During my first residence, that was last year, because this is my 5th year that I work with ceramic. During the residence at Gulegao, International Research Center for Contemporary Ceramic, I started to feel that ceramic not need the formal again, but can explain the need to use as simple as a filter of my present to translate emotion, personal emotion and social at the same time. With Volume of Disgust, this is the title of the piece that I make in the residence, I involve the food served on ceramic as an element of restlessness at home. The excessive amount of food in our society has led to an overproduction of its pottery, or which is served. The excess is dimensionless. In this work, volume is a force like an extrude, but hyperchaotic in the detail. Bulimia, the abundance and the limitless production seem to go on forever, destroying itself and recreating as the organic process of nature. Chicken is a common element to the tables all over the world, and so the work can have a force of understanding all over the globe. The concept that I pursue is not only such a reading, but stems from a very intimate feelings. In fact, I always play between society problem and very intimate problems one, because I really feel to filter my present. And so it's a meaning that I'm talking about my family and my personal relation with food, but at the same time, I feel that I'm talking for a lot of people, and this is my personal feeling when I work. Okay. This is my first solo exhibition that I made last year in Milan, and Wendy asked me to bring here in Taipei. So, how can you see there is always a domestic ambient around it, and I project the entire room at the same time, because I always have to feel like I'm creating a situation like a room. Between virtual and real, we are trapped into a technological magic that has the spell of Circe. Circe is the name of this solo exhibition. Circe is a mythological myth that comes from the Odyssey. She was a witch, and with her beauty, she seduced man. But for me, the mythological myth is only the beginning, because for me, the myth is now the technology, because technology every day seduces us with images, sound, and we are always connected with tablets and mobile phone that became something of common in the domestic environment. So we are not in the presence of metaphor or symbol, but common items consumed by bulimic obsession with the same maniac ease with which we appropriate the image. Okay. iPhone and tablets are our current technological prothesis, amplifying our perception through a portal of endless information and endless possibility. The white plate in Canto, hanging on the wall, has not a decoration but virtual ones, and always different combination that the user deals between flowers and colorful butterfly, visible on a phantasmalogical as well through the tablet. Ironic consideration of how obsolete the classical decoration of the artifact in ceramic can be, especially in relation with the exasperated speed of technological progress. This was a plate famous of the town where I have a studio, Nove, and during this work, the artist of this plate died because it was very old. A lot of artisans there are very, very old. And I say, how at my age, I'm 27 now, I had to do the same work around the brush. I haven't his culture, his tradition. I really more practice with the tablet, and I can give something more now, I think. And so I reduce this in something more graphic, because communication is really graphic and direct, I think. And with this object we are, for us, normal to amplify our possibility with the reality. So I create this augmented reality that is talking about that, but with something different. I have more information, I have sound, and invite everybody to prove at to third floor here in the Taipei, in the museum. 300 dishes are the center of this piece. It's called Convivio, Banquet. Here remains of the feast are stacked in bulk, witness of many mutation. The hairs of a decadent charm now abundant to a viral and virtual mutation that leaves no other way than that of a new of remote interpretation. resting or suspended between two ambiguous reality, viral proliferation light up a plastic blue, as it is the nature of some animal and plant species to predict danger at the same time the full-blown fatal attraction. And it's not something all viral that show the transformation. Transformation has always something of unrest. Time is up, 5 minutes, okay. But it's about the color of, if you think all the social networks are working around blue, so communication is this blue, that is, technology is this blue that enter in our life. If you think Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, all these social networks that combine our life become, work with blue. Okay. If you want to see in a few seconds the video, okay. You see that there is something that ceramic continues like in virtual world, and this application that I invented amplify our perception of the reality. All the molds come from all the factories, so I try to keep all the old things that surround me in the factory, and I put new ones. And Megaron, this is the name of this species, that means the center of the house. Is static place in the case of the Megaron, a stage of a natural process between the purity of white object until the decomposition and the total oppression. The centerpiece of the phenomenon determinate of stability is without any further multimedia possibility and stands up for a simulacrum of the change. Protected by a glass case as an archaeological object of art, it let examine itself in detail with careful consideration that is interested and respected and faithful and inevitable metamorphosis. I go very quickly now. This is my second exhibition made in a museum, and I work before inside this picture inside my studio. I always work around a table because the figure of a table is very important for me because it means family, but you see that's something that is unrest now. And I work with the classical potteries that's overproduced and always the chicken that became a symbol of food in general, like this. And these are very important, connect to the theme of our conversation. I work with all the old tools in the factory.